Jake Morrison woke up at 5 in the morning like he did every day for the past 15 years. He made his coffee black and strong, then walked to his workshop on the edge of New Haven Colony. The morning air smelled like fresh soil and growing plants. Jake loved that smell. It meant his machines were working and people would have food to eat. His workshop was filled with tools and half-built machines. Jake built things that helped farmers grow crops. He made soil testers that could tell if dirt was good for planting. He built water systems that brought clean water to dry fields. He created air cleaners that made the planet's atmosphere better for human lungs. Everything Jake made helped life grow stronger. Now Jake was not a social man. He liked machines more than people because machines were simple. You give them power and they do their job. People were complicated. They had feelings and opinions and always wanted to talk. Jake preferred the quiet hum of his equipment to the noise of conversation. The colony of New Haven was home to 3 million people. Most of them were farmers or scientists. They came to this planet to build a new world, where humans could live and grow food. The planet was far from Earth in a quiet part of space. Nothing dangerous ever happened here. The most exciting thing that happened was when the weather machines broke down, and Jake had to fix them. Jake spent his morning working on a new soil processor. This machine could take bad dirt and make it good for growing vegetables. He used simple parts but put them together in smart ways. Other engineers said Jake had a gift for making complex things work with basic tools. Jake just thought he was good at solving problems. At noon, Jake ate lunch alone in his workshop. He read technical manuals while he ate his sandwich. He was reading about atmospheric conversion when his communication device buzzed. The message was from Colony Command. Strange ships had appeared at the edge of the solar system. Jake looked up from his manual. Strange ships meant aliens. This was the first time aliens had ever come to human space. Jake felt curious but not worried. The colony had a small defense force, but everyone said they would never need to use it. Humans were peaceful people, and surely aliens would be peaceful too. The afternoon brought more news. The alien ships were called Zilani vessels. They sent messages saying they wanted to meet humans and learn about their culture. Colony Command was excited. This was a historic moment. First contact with an alien species would change everything. For humanity. Jake went back to his work. The soil processor needed 3 more days to finish. He wanted to complete it before the aliens arrived. The machine would help farmers in the southern districts grow better crops. Jake thought this was more important than alien visitors. The Zilani ships moved closer to New Haven over the next 2 days. They were huge vessels that looked like metal eggs covered in spikes. Their ships were bigger than anything humans had ever built. Jake saw pictures of them on the news feeds, but he was more interested in his soil processor. On the 3rd day, the Zilani sent a small ship to the planet's surface. Colony Command prepared a welcome ceremony. They asked Jake to help because the aliens breathed methane gas instead of oxygen. Jake built special air systems so the Zilani could attend the ceremony without dying. Jake felt proud to help with first contact. He believed this was the start of a new age for humanity. Aliens and humans would share knowledge and become friends. Maybe the Zilani had better farming technology. Maybe Jake could learn new ways to help plants grow. The Zilani representative arrived in a protective suit that kept methane around its body. It was tall and thin with gray skin and forearms. Its head was larger than a human head, and it had black eyes like a shark. When it spoke, its voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. The alien said its name was Sub-Commander Vex. It brought greetings from the Zilani Empire and gifts of metal sculptures. Colony Administrator Helen Brooks welcomed the alien with a speech about friendship between species. Jake watched from the back of the crowd, feeling hopeful about the future.sub-commander. Vex asked many questions about human society. It wanted to know how many people lived on New Haven. It asked about human military strength and defensive weapons. It was curious about human food production and population growth rates. Jake thought these were normal questions for a first meeting. Between species. The ceremony ended with promises of cultural exchange and trade agreements. Sub-Commander Vex said more Zilani ships would arrive soon to begin formal relations. Colony Administrator Brooks was thrilled. She announced that New Haven would become the center of human-alien cooperation. Jake walked back to his workshop feeling satisfied. He had helped make history by building the air systems for the ceremony. Now he could return to his important work. The soil processor was almost finished, and farmers were waiting for it. Jake believed this was his purpose in life, building machines that helped people grow food and live better lives. He had no idea that Sub-Commander Vex had already marked New Haven as the next target for harvesting. The Zilani did not come to make friends. They came to study human weaknesses before the real fleet arrived to process every living thing on the planet into food. Captain Lisa Parker stood in the command center of the Colonial Defense Force base, watching the screens that showed Zilani ship movements. Something felt wrong about the alien visitors, but she could not put her finger on what bothered her. Zilani had been on New Haven for 2 weeks now, and their behavior seemed strange. Lisa had 20 years of military experience. She started as a young soldier and worked her way up to captain through hard work and smart thinking. Her job was to protect the colony from any threats. Most days this meant checking sensor readings and filing reports because nothing dangerous ever happened in this quiet corner of space. The Zilani said they came to trade, but their ships carried no cargo holds. They claimed to want cultural exchange, but never shared anything about their own society. When human scientists asked about Zilani art or history, the aliens always changed the subject. They only seemed interested in asking questions about humans. Lisa made a list of the questions the Zilani asked most often. How many humans lived on each continent? What weapons did the Colonial Defense Force have? How fast could human ships travel? Where were the food production centers located? How long would it take to evacuate the colony if something bad happened? These were not the questions of traders or explorers. These were the questions of someone planning an attack. Lisa tried to share her concerns with Colony Administrator Helen Brooks, but Helen was too excited about the historic first contact to listen to warnings. Helen believed the Zilani were humanity's first alien friends and nothing Lisa said could change her mind. Jake Morrison continued working in his workshop, completely unaware of any problems. Lisa visited him one afternoon to ask if he could modify some of his farming equipment to work as weapons. Jake looked horrified at the suggestion. I build things that help life grow, not take it away, Jake told her firmly. You are being paranoid, Captain Parker. The Zilani are peaceful visitors who want to learn about our culture. Violence is not the answer to every problem. Lisa left Jake's workshop feeling frustrated. The colony's best engineer refused to help prepare defenses because he believed in the goodness of aliens who might be planning to kill everyone. Lisa wished she could share Jake's faith in peaceful solutions, but her military training made her see threats everywhere. More Zilani ships arrived each day. They said these were cultural exchange vessels bringing artists and scientists. But Lisa's sensors showed the ships were heavily armed with weapons more powerful than anything in the human fleet. The aliens were building a military force in human space while pretending to be peaceful visitors. Lisa ordered her intelligence team to try intercepting Zilani communications. This was difficult because the aliens used quantum encryption that scrambled their messages into random noise. But human computers were getting better at breaking alien codes, and after days of work, they managed to decode some transmissions. The translated messages made Lisa's blood run cold. The Zilani were not traders or explorers or peaceful visitors. They were advanced scouts for something called a harvesting fleet. The messages talked about human population densities and estimated processing yields. They discussed the nutritional value of human tissue and the best methods for converting organic matter into nutrient paste. Lisa read the translations 3 times before the full horror sank in. The Zilani did not see humans as potential friends or trading partners. They saw humans as food. The entire colony of New Haven was nothing more than a farm, full of livestock waiting to be harvested. The worst part was learning that New Haven was not the first target. The intercepted messages mentioned 17 other species that had been processed by Zilani harvesting fleets. Entire civilizations had been ground up into food to feed the growing Zilani empire. Billions of intelligent beings had died screaming as they were dissolved in industrial acid baths. Lisa immediately called an emergency meeting with Colony Administrator Brooks and showed her the translated messages. Helen read them twice, then sat in stunned silence for several minutes. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "How long do we have before the main fleet arrives?" Helen asked. Lisa checked the intelligence reports. "The harvesting fleet is already in hyperspace traveling toward our system. They will arrive in 4 days." Helen Brooks aged 10 years in that moment. The woman who had been so excited about first contact now realized she had welcomed humanity's executioners to New Haven with open arms. She had helped the Zilani scouts gather information about human defenses and population centers. "What are our options?" Helen asked. Lisa had been thinking about this question since reading the first translated message. "We have 18 ships in the Colonial Defense Force. Intelligence estimates the harvesting fleet has over 300 vessels. We cannot win a direct military confrontation. Then we evacuate," Helen said quickly. "We put everyone on transport ships and run." "Our transport capacity is limited," Lisa replied. "We can evacuate maybe 200,000 people before the fleet arrives. That leaves almost 3 million colonists with no way to escape." Helen slumped in her chair. There was no good choice. They could save a small fraction of the population or stay and watch everyone die together. Either way, most of the people on New Haven were doomed. Lisa spent the rest of the day preparing evacuation plans and defense strategies. The defense strategy was simple: use the 18 Colonial Defense Force ships to delay the Zilani fleet for as long as possible while transport ships carried civilians to safety. It was a suicide mission, but it might save some lives. The evacuation list prioritized essential personnel who could help rebuild human civilization elsewhere. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and teachers got the first seats on transport ships. Jake Morrison's name appeared near the top of the list because his engineering skills would be valuable for any surviving human colonies. Lisa delivered Jake's evacuation notice personally. She found him in his workshop, putting finishing touches on the soil processor he had been building. When she told him about the Zilani's true purpose, Jake's face went white with shock. "They are going to kill everyone?" Jake asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "Not kill," Lisa corrected grimly. "Process. They are going to dissolve every person on this planet into nutrient paste to feed their empire. Men, women, children, babies. Everyone becomes food." Jake stared at his soil processor for a long time without speaking. This machine was designed to help farmers grow better crops. Now he learned that the farmers themselves were just crops waiting to be harvested by alien monsters. Jake Morrison sat in his workshop staring at the evacuation notice in his hands. Captain Parker had left 10 minutes ago, but Jake had not moved from his chair. The paper said he had 6 hours to pack essential items before reporting to transport. Ship 7 for immediate departure from New Haven. Jake looked around his workshop at the machines he had built over 15 years. The soil processors that helped farmers grow better crops. The atmospheric converters that made the air cleaner for human lungs. The water purification systems that turned dirty water into drinking water. Every machine in this room was designed to help life flourish. Now he knew that alien monsters saw all human life as nothing more than food to be processed. The Zelani had studied human farming techniques, not to learn about agriculture, but to understand how humans raised their own food. The aliens were learning the best methods for harvesting the human crop. Jake crumpled the evacuation notice and threw it in the trash. He was not leaving New Haven. This was his home, and these were his people. If the Zelani wanted to harvest humans, they would have to get through him first. Jake walked to his computer terminal and began accessing the colony's industrial databases. He pulled up technical specifications for every piece of Zelani technology that human sensors had scanned. Ship hull compositions, engine frequencies, atmospheric requirements, communication protocols. Jake studied each detail with the same careful attention he used when designing farming equipment. For 15 years, Jake had been a peaceful man who built machines to help life grow. But the Zelani had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened his people and given him a reason to fight. Now Jake's engineering mind was focused on a very different kind of problem. How do you kill something that thinks it cannot be killed? Jake worked through the night, redesigning his machines for war. The soil processor that took 3 weeks to build could be converted into an ammunition factory in 6 hours. The atmospheric converter could produce chemical weapons instead of clean air. The water purification system could manufacture explosives instead of drinking water. Every peaceful machine in Jake's workshop could become an instrument of death with the right modifications. Jake had never thought about weaponizing his equipment before, but now the possibilities seemed endless. Years of solving agricultural problems had trained his mind to see solutions that others missed. Captain Parker found Jake in his workshop at dawn, still working on weapon designs. She looked surprised to see him there instead of on an evacuation transport. "You missed your evacuation window," Parker said. "The next transport leaves in 2 hours." "I am not evacuating," Jake replied without looking up from his computer screen. "I am staying here to fight." Parker shook her head. "Jake, this is not your fight. You are an engineer, not a soldier. Your job is to survive and help rebuild human civilization somewhere else." Jake finally turned to face her. Parker was startled by the change in his appearance. The gentle engineer she had known for years was gone. In his place stood a man with cold determination in his eyes. "The Zelani made this my fight when they decided to turn my neighbors into food," Jake said quietly. "They studied our farming techniques to learn how to harvest us. Now I am going to show them what human engineering can really do." Jake turned his computer screen so Parker could see the weapon designs he had been working on. Her eyes widened as she realized what she was looking at. Jake had turned every piece of agricultural equipment on New Haven into a component of a planetary defense system. "These modifications would take weeks to implement," Parker said. "Not if I have help," Jake replied. "I need access to the colonies, industrial fabrication centers, and a team of technicians who are not afraid to get their hands dirty." Parker studied the designs more carefully. Jake's weapon systems were unlike anything she had seen before. Instead of building traditional guns and missiles, he had created a network of interconnected devices that could turn the entire planet into a trap for the Zelani fleet. "This is brilliant but insane," Parker said. "Even if we could build all this in time, there is no guarantee it would work against Zelani technology." "There are no guarantees in war," Jake replied. "But I would rather die fighting than let those monsters process my friends into paste without a struggle." Parker made her decision. She activated her communicator and began issuing orders to her remaining personnel. The evacuation would continue, but they would also implement Jake's defensive modifications. Anyone who wanted to stay and fight could volunteer to help. BuildWeapons.word spread quickly through the colony about Jake's plan. Hundreds of people volunteered to help, even though it meant giving up their chance to evacuate. Farmers and scientists worked alongside colonial defense. Force technicians to modify agricultural equipment for combat. Jake coordinated the entire operation from his workshop. He had divided the colony into sectors and assigned specific weapon systems to each area. The northern farming district would become a chemical weapon production center. The atmospheric processing stations would generate toxic clouds that could eat through alien ship hulls. The orbital farming platforms would be converted into kinetic bombardment systems. The work proceeded around the clock as the Zelani harvesting fleet drew closer to New Haven. Jake barely slept during the 3 days of preparation. He survived on coffee and determination while his volunteers raced to complete the weapon modifications. Colonel Brooks visited Jake on the final day before the Zelani arrival. She found him in the main fabrication center supervising the installation of targeting systems on converted farming equipment. "I owe you an apology," Brooks said. "I was so excited about first contact that I ignored the warning signs. I helped the Zelani gather intelligence about our defenses." Jake paused in his work. "You could not have known what they really were. The Zelani are experts at deception. They have probably fooled 17 other species the same way. What are our chances?" Brooks asked. Jake considered the question carefully. "The Zelani have superior numbers and technology, but they are expecting to fight farmers and scientists with basic weapons. They are not expecting to face a planet that has been completely weaponized by someone who understands both human and Zelani technology. Is that enough to win?" Jake smiled for the first time in days. It was not a pleasant smile. "The Zelani want to harvest humans because they think we are soft and weak. They are about to learn that peaceful people can become very dangerous when you give them a reason to fight." The Zelani harvesting fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly when Jake's calculations predicted they would. 312 vessels arranged in perfect formation like a swarm of mechanical insects. Each ship was the size of a human, city and bristled with weapons designed to break planetary defenses quickly and efficiently. Fleet Commander Zeph stood on the bridge of the flagship, reviewing the final attack plans. The Zelani had performed this operation 17 times before, on 17 different worlds. Each harvesting followed the same pattern. Overwhelming force destroyed any military resistance within hours. Then processing ships landed to begin converting the population into nutrient paste. Zeth expected this harvest to be even easier than usual. Human technology was primitive compared to Zelani science. The Colonial Defense Force had only 18 ships against over 300 Zelani vessels. The humans would be crushed before they could mount any meaningful resistance. Jake Morrison watched the enemy fleet through the sensors in his command center deep underground. Captain Parker stood beside him coordinating the colonial defense. 4 ships, while Jake controlled the planetary weapon systems. Both humans knew they were facing impossible odds, but neither showed any fear. "All weapon systems are online and ready," Jake reported. "Atmospheric processors are generating combat chemicals. Kinetic bombardment platforms are loaded and targeted. Chemical distribution networks are pressurized and waiting for activation." Parker nodded grimly. "Colonial Defense Force ships are in position. We will engage the fleet while you hit them with planetary weapons. Try to give us some kind of advantage." The first Zelani ships entered weapons range and immediately opened fire on the human vessels. Bright energy beams lanced through space as the 2 fleets began their deadly dance. The human ships were faster and more maneuverable, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Jake waited until the Zelani fleet was fully committed to the space battle before activating his first surprise. The atmospheric processors around New Haven suddenly began pumping clouds of corrosive gas into orbit. The chemical mixture was designed specifically to eat through the metal alloys used in Zelani ship construction. Fleet Commander Zeth watched in confusion as his forward ships began reporting hull breaches. The humans had somehow weaponized their own atmosphere. Zelani vessels that entered the chemical clouds found their armor dissolving like sugar in acid. Several ships lost structural integrity and broke apart under their own weight. But this was only the beginning of all. Jake's assault, the orbital farming platforms that had grown crops in space for 15 years, suddenly revealed their true purpose. Jake had converted them into massive kinetic weapons that could hurl tungsten rods at enormous speeds. These projectiles moved so fast, they were almost impossible to detect until impact. Zelani ships began exploding without warning as tungsten. RODs punched through their hulls like bullets through paper. Each impact released energy equivalent to a nuclear weapon. The perfect formation of the harvesting fleet dissolved into chaos as ships tried to avoid the invisible death raining down from converted farming platforms. Fleet Commander Zeth ordered his fleet to change tactics. Instead of maintaining formation, the Zelani ships spread out and began random evasive maneuvers. This reduced losses from kinetic bombardment, but made coordination much more difficult. Jake adapted instantly to the new situation. He activated the communications warfare system he had built from the colony's broadcasting equipment. Instead of entertainment programs, the transmitters now beamed viral code designed to corrupt Zelani navigation systems, Zelani ships throughout. The fleet suddenly found their instruments showing false readings. Navigation computers thought they were flying through solid rock. Weapon systems aimed at empty space instead of human targets. Some ships collided with each other when their sensors reported incorrect positions. Captain Parker pressed the advantage by ordering her ships to attack the confused Zelani vessels. Human weapons were weaker than Zelani technology, but accuracy made up for lack of power. While the aliens struggled with corrupted instruments, this Colonial Defense Force ships picked them off one by one. Jake monitored the battle from his underground command center, making adjustments to his weapon systems in real time. When the Zelani adapted their shields, he changed the frequency of his energy weapons. When they modified their hulls, he switched to different chemical compounds. The peaceful engineer had become a conductor of destruction, orchestrating a symphony of violence across the entire solar system. But the Zelani were learning too. Fleet Commander Zeth began to understand that he was not fighting a conventional planetary defense. The humans had turned their entire world into a weapon system controlled by someone who understood both human and Zelani technology. Zeth ordered his ships to target the source of the planetary weapons. Massive energy beams struck New Haven's surface, trying to destroy the hidden command centers. Jake's underground bunker shook from repeated impacts, but the heavy shielding held against the bombardment. Jake retaliated by activating the ground-based defense network. Missile silos that had been disguised as grain storage facilities opened to reveal fusion warheads. Surface installations that looked like water treatment plants began firing particle beams at low-flying Zelani ships. The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Zelani fleet was larger and more advanced, but Jake's modifications had turned New Haven into a fortress that could fight back against any attacker. Every system on the planet had been weaponized, including things the Zelani never expected to be dangerous. Weather control satellites began generating electromagnetic storms that interfered with Zelani sensors. Underground mining equipment drilled up through the planet's crust to create artificial volcanoes beneath enemy landing zones. Even the colony's waste processing systems had been converted to produce biological weapons. Fleet Commander Zeth realized he was fighting an enemy unlike any the Zelani had encountered before. Previous species had used conventional tactics and traditional strategies. Humans fought like the entire universe was a tool to be weaponized against their enemies. But numbers still mattered in warfare. For every Zelani ship that Jake destroyed, 2 more took its place. The Colonial Defense Force was down to 6 vessels and running low on ammunition. The planetary weapon systems were beginning to malfunction from constant use. Jake watched his tactical displays with growing concern. His weapons were performing better than expected, but the Zelani fleet was too large to defeat with conventional methods. He needed something that would change the fundamental nature of the battle. Jake began typing commands into his computer terminal. If the Zelani wanted to see what human engineering could accomplish, he would show them the most dangerous creation of his career, something that would make them regret ever coming to human space. Jake Morrison stared at the tactical display showing Zelani ground forces breaking through the orbital defenses. Enemy landing ships were descending toward New Haven's surface like metal rain. Captain Parker's remaining ships fought desperately in space, but they could not stop the invasion force from reaching the planet. Jake's underground command center shuddered as Zelani bombardment grew more intense. Dust fell from the ceiling, and several monitoring screens flickered with static. The aliens had located his position and were trying to destroy the brain of the planetary defense system. "Jake, we need to evacuate." Captain Parker's voice crackled over the communication system. "The ground defenses cannot hold much longer. Zelani troops will reach your position within the hour." Jake continued typing commands into his computer terminal without responding. He was implementing the final phase of his modifications to New Haven, the most dangerous and desperate weapon he had ever conceived, a system so terrible that he had hoped never to use it. "Jake, do you copy?" Parker called again. "We have transport. Ships standing by to extract you and your technical team." "Negative," Jake replied calmly. "I am not evacuating. I am activating Protocol 0. Parker's blood went cold. She had read Jake's complete weapon specifications, and Protocol 0 was the most frightening entry in the entire database. Jake had found a way to turn New Haven's terraforming core into a planet-killing weapon. "Jake, you cannot be serious," Parker said. "Protocol 0 will destroy the entire solar system. Everyone will die, including our own people." "Everyone will die anyway if the Zelani complete their harvest," Jake replied. "At least this way we take them with us and send a message to the rest of their empire." Jake's hands moved across the control interface with practiced efficiency. He had spent 3 days preparing Protocol 0 while hoping he would never need to use it. The terraforming core that had made New Haven habitable for humans could be overloaded to create an artificial singularity. The science behind Protocol 0 was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. New Haven's terraforming core contained exotic matter that normally stabilized the planet's gravity and magnetic fields. By reversing the containment fields, Jake could cause the exotic matter to collapse into a black hole. The resulting gravitational anomaly would consume the planet, the Zelani fleet, and everything else within several million kilometers. It was the ultimate scorched earth tactic. If humans could not have New Haven, then nobody could have it. Jake began the activation sequence while Zelani forces closed in on his position. The terraforming core was located 5 kilometers beneath the surface in a heavily shielded chamber. Even if the aliens captured the command center, they could not reach the core in time to stop the process. Automated systems throughout the colony began shutting down as Jake redirected all available power to the terraforming core. Life support systems went offline. Atmospheric processors stopped working. Gravity generators fluctuated wildly as exotic matter. Containment fields destabilized, The few remaining colonists who had not evacuated felt the change immediately. Gravity became unreliable, causing objects to float randomly through the air. The atmosphere grew thin and hard to breathe. Temperature controls failed, leaving some areas freezing cold, while others became burning hot. Jake, watch status. Reports scroll across his screens as New Haven slowly died around him. The planet that had been his home for 15 years was becoming uninhabitable as he sacrificed it to stop the Zelani harvest. Every person, animal, and plant on New Haven would perish, but their deaths would prevent the aliens from processing billions of humans on other worlds. Captain Parker made one final attempt to reach Jake by radio. There has to be another way. We can evacuate more people if you give us time. Please reconsider Protocol 0. The Zelani have done this to 17 other species, Jake replied. They will keep harvesting until someone stops them permanently. Today, that someone is me. Jake sealed the command center blast doors and activated automated defenses around the terraforming core chamber. Zelani troops could pound on the barriers for days without breaking through. By then, Protocol 0 would be irreversible, and the artificial singularity would consume everything in the system. The first signs of gravitational collapse appeared 30 minutes later. Zelani ships in low orbit suddenly found themselves pulled toward the planet's surface by increasing gravity. Fleet Commander Zeth ordered an immediate withdrawal, but discovered that his ships could no longer escape. New Haven's gravity well. Jake had mined the hyperspace exit points with gravitational disruptors. Any ship attempting to jump to faster-than-light travel would be torn apart by artificial singularities. The Zelani fleet was trapped in a dying solar system with no way to escape. Panic spread through the alien fleet as ship after ship failed to achieve hyperspace transition. Fleet Commander Zeth realized too late what the human engineer had done. The species they had dismissed as harmless prey had revealed the capacity for ultimate violence. Jake felt the command center shake as gravitational waves rippled through New Haven's crust. The terraforming core was approaching critical instability. Soon the exotic matter would collapse past the point of no return and create a permanent black hole. Jake thought about the soil processor he had been building when this nightmare began. That simple machine was designed to help farmers grow better crops. Now he was using the same engineering principles to build a weapon that could crack planets and collapse stars. The transformation felt complete. Jake Morrison, the peaceful engineer, who built machines to nurture life, had become Jake Morrison, the destroyer of worlds. The Zelani had succeeded in turning him into something he never wanted to be. But they would pay the ultimate price for that. Success. Warning alarms fueled the command center as gravitational stress began tearing New Haven apart. Massive earthquakes split continents in half. Oceans boiled away into space as the planets' crust cracked like an eggshell. The beautiful world the 3 million humans had called home was dying in geological agony. Jake watched his homeworld destroy itself and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Let the Zelani see what humans were capable when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. Let them carry word back to their empire about the species that would rather die than submit to harvesting. But Jake had made sure that no Zelani would escape. To tell that story, Protocol 0 would consume every ship in the fleet and send a very different message to the galaxy. When the Zelani harvesting fleet failed to return home, their empire would know that humanity was not defenseless prey. Peaceful man who had worried about crop rotation schedules now held the power to collapse a solar system. And he was using that power without hesitation or regret. The artificial singularity reached critical mass just as the first Zelani troops breached the outer defenses of Jake's command center. Reality twisted around New Haven as space and time bent under impossible gravitational forces. The planet that had been home to 3 million humans collapsed into a point of infinite density smaller than an atom. Fleet Commander Zeth watched his flagship instruments go insane as the black hole consumed everything within 10 million kilometers. Xylani vessels throughout the fleet were stretched into long strings of matter before disappearing beyond the event. Horizon. The harvesting operation that should have been routine had become a disaster of unprecedented scale. Only 7 Xylani ships managed to escape the gravitational catastrophe. They had been at the edge of the fleet formation when Jake activated Protocol Zero. These survivors limped away from the New Haven system, carrying terrible news back to the Xylani Empire. Captain Lisa Parker commanded one of the few human vessels that survived the battle. Her ship had been far enough from New Haven to avoid the black hole, but close enough to witness Jake's final solution. Parker stared at the swirling event horizon that had once been a beautiful planet and tried to process what she had seen. Jake Morrison had killed himself, his homeworld, and most of the Xylani harvesting fleet rather than allow the aliens to process humans into food. The gentle engineer who built farming equipment had become something the galaxy had never seen before. A human willing to destroy everything rather than surrender. The news of New Haven's destruction spread through human space within days. Other colonies received emergency broadcasts warning them about the Xylani threat and describing Jake's defensive modifications. Fear and anger swept through humanity as people learned about the alien empire that viewed them as livestock. But human colonies also received something else: complete technical specifications for every weapon system Jake had created. The peaceful engineer had made sure his defensive innovations would survive, even if he did not. Other human worlds began implementing Jake's modifications to their own agricultural and industrial equipment. The transformation of human society happened faster than anyone thought possible. Farming colonies became fortress worlds bristling with hidden weapons. Research stations turned their laboratories into weapon development centers. Even exploration ships carried Jake's designs for converting peaceful technology into instruments of war. Dr. Susan Clark worked in a laboratory on the colony world of Haven's Rest, modifying Jake's chemical weapon formulas. She had been a botanist, studying plant genetics before learning about the Xylani threat. Now she spent her days creating biological agents that could dissolve alien ship hulls. Jake Morrison changed everything, Clark told her research team. He showed us that any technology can become a weapon if you understand the underlying principles. We are not defenseless farmers anymore. We are humanity's immune system responding to a galactic infection. The Xylani Empire received scattered reports from the 7 surviving ships, but initially dismissed them as impossible. No species had ever destroyed an entire star system rather than submit to harvesting. The idea that humans would choose mutual annihilation over survival violated every assumption about intelligent behavior. High Command Zethara studied the sensor data from New Haven for weeks before accepting the truth. Humans had weaponized their own planet and used it as a suicide bomb against the harvesting fleet. The species the Xylani had marked as easy prey possessed a level of destructive capability that bordered on insanity. More disturbing reports reached Xylani High Command over the following months. Human colonies throughout their territory were implementing the New Haven defensive modifications. Peaceful farming worlds were transforming into military installations capable of threatening Xylani ships. Reconnaissance missions to human space began encountering resistance unlike anything the Xylani had seen before. Human defensive systems seemed to violate the basic laws of warfare. Farming equipment doubled as artillery. Atmospheric processors generated chemical weapons. Even entertainment broadcasts contained viral code that corrupted Xylani navigation systems. High Command Zethara convened an emergency session to discuss the human problem. For the first time in Xylani history, a harvesting operation had resulted in military casualties that exceeded the value of the biological resources obtained. Humans were proving too dangerous to process safely. The human homeworld Earth contains over 8 billion potential food units, reported Intelligence Coordinator Vex. But based on what we observed at New Haven, the cost of harvesting Earth might exceed the nutritional benefit. Are you suggesting we abandon the human harvest? Asked High Command Zithara. I am suggesting we reconsider our classification of humans as a food species, Vex replied carefully. Perhaps they would be more valuable as military allies than as nutrient paste. The suggestion was revolutionary. The Zelani Empire had never formed alliances with species they had initially marked for harvesting. But humans had demonstrated capabilities that demanded respect rather than appetite. Captain, Parker received new orders from Colonial Command while her ship patrolled the Outer Rim looking for Zelani activity. Instead of defensive missions, she was assigned to establish contact with other species that had been threatened by Zelani harvesting fleets. Parker's first stop was the Kepler system, where the insectoid Thrix had been fighting a losing war against Zelani expansion. The Thrix were skilled engineers, but their technology was no match for Zelani military science. They were slowly being pushed back toward their homeworld, where extinction awaited. We bring an offer of alliance, Parker told the Thrix Queen through translation equipment. Humanity has developed effective weapons against Zelani forces. We are willing to share these technologies with other species fighting for survival. The Thrix Queen studied the technical specifications that Parker provided. Jake's weapon designs could be adapted to work with Thrix industrial equipment. Modifications that had saved human colonies could also protect insectoid worlds. What do you want in return for this knowledge? The Queen asked suspiciously. Partnership against a common enemy, Parker replied. The Zelani see all non-Zelani species as food. They will not stop with humans or Thrix. Every intelligent race in the galaxy is on their harvest list. Similar conversations took place throughout the local galactic region as human diplomats contacted dozens of species threatened by Zelani expansion. Jake's weapon designs became the foundation for a defensive alliance that spanned multiple star systems. The galaxy was learning the humans possessed something more dangerous than advanced technology or superior numbers. Humans had the capacity to adapt any tool into a weapon and the willingness to use those weapons without limitation when their survival was threatened. Jake Morrison had been a peaceful man who wanted nothing more than to help plants grow. But when aliens threatened his people, he had become something the galaxy would remember forever. The engineer who turned an entire planet into a weapon and showed the universe that humanity would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The Zelani Empire still controlled vast territories and commanded massive fleets, but they no longer saw humans as easy prey. Jake's sacrifice had bought humanity something invaluable in a hostile galaxy. Respect earned through the ultimate demonstration of destructive capability. The sleeping giant had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same.